This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
It's time to think opposite. Suspend your belief, consider another perspective, and proceed with clarity. Coming to you live from the west coast of Canada, it's live and it's edgy. Now here's your host, Alison Donaghy.
Hello, listeners. This is Alison Donaghy here, owner of Domino Thinking, and you are listening to Think Opposite radio show. So glad that you're here to join us. We have a great guest today talking all about time management, and if you don't have enough time, then it's your fault. But before we get to him, I want to just talk about this thing that always comes up for me. You know, my dad used to always say, I'm not always right, but I'm never wrong. And I wish he was still alive today to have that discussion with me about this statement, because I've thought about this expression a lot over the years. And I used it when I was younger because I thought I knew everything and I was just being cheeky. And I use it now, though, as a way to start conversations with people that I meet, and even today on this show. And I often wonder, what makes us so certain that we are right? You know, why is it so important for us to cling to our beliefs with the absolute certainty of the rightness of what we think about? Why do we think that we are defined by our beliefs to the extent that we refuse to talk to people who disagree with us? We end friendships, and we make it the focus of our fights and the retelling of our war stories. I propose, what if we are wrong about everything? What if we spent the day today embracing the other side, assuming that we are wrong and everybody else is right? Explore all of the thoughts as if we're wrong about them. What if your teenager knows more than you do? It's possible. What if it's okay if your husband leaves the toilet seat up? What if a woman's value is not tied to her thigh gap? What if God exists? What if he doesn't? By exploring these other sides, what happened to you? Did you die? Did some weird rash extend all over your body? Probably not. You're probably totally going to be fine if you consider this other perspective. Because we are so completely capable of considering other perspectives, of thinking opposite, without our world falling apart. We just don't do it enough. So what happens when we suspend our belief and consider for a moment that the other person may actually be right? You know, and this comes up all the time. I know it comes up in my life. I'm quite certain it comes up in your life too, in different ways, shape, or form. So you may or may not know this, but I also own a house painting company called Sunshine Girls Painting, as well as Domino Thinking. And while it's unusual that I was in the paint store actually ordering paint and picking it up, because typically I just meet clients and manage the company, but on this particular day, it made sense for me to go in and order the paint. And I was undecided about one of the products that I should use. It was an odd situation, and I was talking to the staff about this. Halfway through the conversation, another painter interjected his opinion without actually knowing what my situation was. He also had no idea who I was, and I think he just assumed I was simply a homeowner. I found I was so irritated with I know and you don't attitude that I totally blew him off. And I'm not proud of this, but at the moment I was so irritated with I know and you don't that I just didn't want to talk to him. You know, he wasn't talking to me like I was an equal, and I was just not interested in being talked down to. But the reality is he could possibly have given me some insight. I didn't like his assumption. I was wrong. I wasn't willing to give it to him that he may be right. You know, he may also have been wrong, and I'll never know. But why did I do that? You know, because I didn't actually mind if I was wrong. I knew I was in uncharted territory. I was okay with him being right and knowing more. But what I wasn't okay with was how I felt treated. You know, he acted, at least this was my perception of his approach, like I was an idiot. That having painted for 23 years, owning my own company for 18 years, counted for nothing. And in turn, I ended up treating him the same way. It wasn't the content, it was the context. And perhaps that's what this is more about. It's not about being right or wrong, but about how we make each other feel, how we discount each other's knowledge and experience, making it really hard to have a conversation. You know, I try to be aware of these things and stay open, but every once in a while, and probably less so now that I'm older and I'm painfully aware of how little I actually know, but every once in a while my ego gets involved and I lose out on an opportunity to have a conversation. One where I may be wrong and can learn something new, or that might confirm my position and make me more confident going forward. So I ask that today you take time to think about how you respond when your rightness comes into question. You know, it's hard, especially with the algorithms that, you know, the internet sends us, the ads and the information to support our position, but it's worth it to try. It's worth it to try for healthy relationships, and it's mandatory for our own growth. My dad was not always right. Full stop. So with us today, we have Garland Coulson, who's Captain Time, a speaker on productivity and time management, and we will be talking to him just as soon as we get back from our commercial break.
Remember when you thought owning your own business would be exciting and help you change the world? Did somewhere along the line your business become hard work with little excitement and make even less impact? It doesn't have to be that way. Alison Donaghy's book, Think Opposite, Using the Domino Effect to Change Your Business, Change the World, offers a way to reclaim what you initially desired for your business. By using a new way of thinking to improve your customer service, staff contribution, and community involvement, your business can make the positive impact on the world you've been yearning for. All it takes is a little shift in the way you think. Go to dominothinking.com. That's www.dominothinking to order your book or connect with Alison at info@dominothinking.com. Have you ever suspended your belief to consider another perspective? Polarization is hurting us both personally and professionally. Let's get out of our echo chambers and really start to have conversations. Alison works with businesses to evaluate where they can think opposite that will result in better customer relations, improved staff satisfaction, and positive impact in community. Alison is a captivating speaker, innovative facilitator, and able to articulate problem areas so that they can be improved. Visit her website, dominothinking.com, or email info@dominothinking.com.
Welcome back. Gosh, I always get so caught up in that music and I just bebop here on the other side of my microphone, and then Cameron, my producer, has to remind me that we're getting online. Anyway, here we are back with Garland Coulson, and I'm really excited to talk to him about time management because it is such a big issue, I think, in most people's life. And I don't know how much time we actually spend thinking about it, but we are going to think about it for the next hour. So welcome, Garland. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. So how did you become Captain Time?
Long story, but I've actually been studying time management for over 20 years. And it started when I got a very lovely gift one Christmas from my manager of a day timer with a gorgeous leather-bound outside and my initials on it. And at first I thought, what a lovely gift. And I thought, is he insinuating I'm not organized enough? But I loved the layout of it and the way it was set up. And I started to seek out time management books and cassette tapes and anything else I could do. And it just started a lifelong quest to master this. So I'm still working to master this. So it's one of the reasons why I teach, because teaching helps you master it yourself.
Mm-hmm. You know, it strikes me as so odd that 20 years ago there was time management issues. When I think about the amount of pressure on my time back then, not to say that there wasn't any, but it was from less sources. You know, I had probably just gotten a cell phone, maybe. No, I don't even think I had a cell phone then. So it was basically people just phoning my house and leaving messages, or my pager. God forbid, I'm dating myself there a little bit. But now have you found that it just becomes more of an issue now than it was then, or do you just think it's always the same issue, just juggling different problems?
You know, it's interesting. I have a book I love, The Time Trap by Alec McKenzie, and it was written back before, a lot of the present day distractions. And, the primary principles in there still apply. I mean, there were still people who were having to run incredibly busy businesses, juggling multiple businesses, and without the capabilities of being able to talk to people across the world that we have now. So there were a lot of drawbacks in there in the old system as well. But yes, we do have a lot more distractions that can come at us, and hence why we need to be more disciplined to be able to manage our time now.
So do you think that now we're just more caught up in all of the do you think we're just going to fill our time with being busy because we're human beings and that's what we do? Like it's just a human condition? Or do you think we have no choice but to be inundated with all of these things, and so we have to become more aware of it to better maneuver?
I think some of us become busy because we don't know what else to do. But there's certainly mistakes or things we're doing. We're not really taking responsibility for our own time management, for our own actions. We keep saying, my life is so busy. It's instead of saying, oh, the time choices I made this week really left me stretched. I should make different time choices next week. So
oh my goodness, that sounds actually like a lot of a personal accountability there.
Yes. Well, think
oh my
of it.
Goodness.
Think of it if you give your child, say, a $10 allowance, for the week, and they run out in the first day, they buy it, spend it all in candy. And then later in the week, they want a $10 toy, and they can't have it because they have no money. So you do that to teach them that they need to be, investing their money into what they really want. Similarly, it's the same thing with time. We have the same amount of time every week, and each week we choose how do we invest it. So if we complain, we're complaining to the wrong person because we should be talking to ourselves about our choices.
Right. It's it is interesting when you put it in that perspective, and I love sort of analogies like that because it allows us to step outside of maybe our own ego relationship with the issue and see it from a different perspective. Do you think busy is the new trend, though? That, I'm just so busy. Oh my goodness, I'm just so busy. Like, do you think that this is like it's fashionable to just be too busy?
Well, I've often heard the phrase, whatever you believe is true, comes true for yourself. So if you keep telling yourself you're busy, well, that's what's going to happen. So instead you need to tell yourself, I have all the time in the world. I'm going to organize these things, and then you're not. So the busyness comes from our choices. Again, it comes back to that. And I've actually had a lot of younger millennials who are having trouble focusing in their studying will often ask me, is there some sort of an app I can get that will block Facebook or block all these other things, or so I can't be distracted, or won't let me play my games? And I'm going, well, yeah, it's like you actually choose to go into those things. You could actually just close them and they're not going to distract you, right? But somehow we want an outside solution to keep us from doing this. And when we're young, that's probably our mothers, but that tell us when to do things, work in your homework, but we've somehow never learned to do this for ourselves.
Right. Well, and do you think it's because we're so... I guess the easy answer is just put your phone in a different room. But I know when I'm at my desk, I have the pop-ups that I'm getting a message here. I get notifications of my next appointment. I get notifications if I get an email, and it's all of this stuff. And then I find if I turn it all off, then I miss too many things that are important that I needed to get back to and didn't. So how do people balance that inundation with the noise of the notifications with time management?
Well, the first thing is to work with notifications when they're appropriate. Okay. So for example, I had a notification come up 10 minutes before this appointment we had to remind me to do this. That's an important notification. I really didn't want to miss this. Right. So that would be bad to have dead air if you've got nobody to interview. So that's an important notification that should happen and should override everything else. But to be honest, while we're talking here, do I need a notification that I've got a new email? Probably not. And I shouldn't be checking my email while I'm talking to you because we can really only focus on one thing at a time. So if I get 10 or 20 email notifications while we're talking, my focus gets distracted. I might go, oh, that could be a really important one. And there's never really an email that's so important that it can't be dealt with an hour from now. Really, if you think about it, is there ever something that's that time? If it is, they're not going to email you, they're going to phone you.
Right. So maybe just keep email notifications turned off all the time and then check it once or twice a day.
Yeah, I check my email twice a day, and I reply to everything within one business day. So my clients are all taken care of. Everybody gets a reply, but the email is usually not that important. And it's human nature. If you're working, let's say you're working on something really important. This is a great proposal for a new client that could bring you tens of thousands of dollars, maybe with a government institution or something. It's really critical. You got to get it out today. And you get a, blip, you've got mail. It's human nature to have to go make sure that email is not important. And usually it's just some newsletter or some sales pitch. It's almost never more important than the task you're working on. So yes, totally turn email notifications off. I have them turned off on my phone as well. I have very few notifications. Primarily, they're really just notifications for appointments. And some of the new tools like Slack are really horrible as well, because it's like constant real-time chatting going on in the office, and you really can't get anything done. Instead, you should be focusing for 30 minutes, then go in and maybe answer all the chat comments.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So before we go any further on that, I just want to circle back, because you had said only focusing on one thing at a time, because that's the only way that we're really going to be effective, which brings up multitasking. And I know there are two very distinct camps when it comes to multitasking. What's your position on that?
Well, multitasking is a myth. Really what we do when we multitask is we give little tiny micro amounts of focus on each thing one at a time. Like we shift from one thing to another, to another, to another. So it's not really effective. And there's been multiple scientific studies that have shown that people perform better when they are allowed to actually focus. And including one case, it was an interesting study where they were studying people who were amazing multitaskers. Like these are people who are juggling huge amounts of projects, and they're known for being great at multitasking. And when they let those people focus, they got even more done.
Wow.
So they were successful just because they're incredibly capable people. The multitasking was actually hurting their productivity, not helping. So yeah, I tell people one thing at a time, do it superbly, focus on it for like a block of time, such as 30 minutes or an hour, and you'll be amazed at what you can get accomplished in 30 minutes when you're uninterrupted.
Do you think there is a gender difference between men and women when it comes to multitasking?
There is, and I've seen, again, some studies and some interesting things, tests done on television and stuff like that in documentaries. Women often tend to multitask a bit more, maybe because evolution has sort of made them listen for the cries of children and things like that they're usually doing those multiple things at once. Whereas men, way back in the dawn of time, were out hunting, where you had to be very focused, very quiet, and only do one thing at a time. So there are some gender differences, but again, they're subtle and can be worked around either way. So it's not like, oh no, if I'm a man, I have to focus. I can't multitask. Or if I'm a woman, I can only multitask. So I can't focus. So it's not really an excuse to go either way.
So gender is not one that we have to actually worry about when it comes to this. Although, I listened to a speaker one time, and he said that physiologically there's a difference between men and women that makes it easier for women to multitask, and that there's more crossover between the blood on our left side of our brain and our right side of the brain. And so it allows us to swap back and forth to both sides of our brains faster, whereas men have less areas of blood traveling back and forth, which means they live on one side of their brain and then they rest in the other side of their brain, and they do different things on both sides, so they don't actually physically, like within inside the body, have that ability to jump back and forth to the same way. And, then I talked to some men in the group that were outraged by this. So it was a really interesting perspective. True or not, I'm not entirely sure, but it's interesting how people will bring up these things. That
it could be true, but I don't think that means we should automatically allow women to text while they're driving and not men. Because I still think anything truly important does need some focus. Okay, so that might work for low low priority things or things that don't require a lot of focus. But if you're budget crunching, like number crunching, or you're brainstorming a brand new workshop or something that requires like you to perform at an amazingly high peak level, it's not going to work. Think of the Olympics, somebody about to do their event in the Olympics. They don't stop midway through the event and answer their phone.
That would be a whole new sport.
Whole new sport. So they're focused, okay? So if you want that world-class performance, you actually need world-class focus.
Right. That makes sense. And then with the accuracy thing too, the more, like I probably don't have to be very accurate when I'm dusting.
Right.
So talking on the phone, dusting is
and that's
totally
a really
acceptable.
good point. Like I crank the tunes when I'm cleaning around the house because that's a kind of multitasking that works because you're not having to focus again with the dusting and there's a difference between multi-threading. Like if you're having something running while you're doing something else, like throwing the laundry in, well then you then go and do dishes makes sense because then the machine, you're automating that. The machine's doing the work in the laundry while you're doing something else. So that's not multitasking. That's just automating and making things work together better.
Yeah, I think that, and that's an important distinction because I do talk to people about multitasking and focus and accuracy and that sort of thing. Probably not as much as you do, but people don't recognize necessarily that there is a difference. Well, partly because they haven't actually stopped to think about it. But there is such a difference. Like, and who's going to fire me if I miss a corner when I'm dusting? Nobody, right? But who's going to be negatively affected? Nobody. And I think that that's for the listeners out there, really think about those tasks that are important to focus on and those ones that just don't carry that same level of importance. And that's where we're talking about the multitasking being something that is probably not beneficial in those situations.
Right. And you can work around that too by creating, say, something like a power hour once a day, maybe first thing in the morning where you work on your hardest, most focus needed items and you do those first. And then later in the day, you do the light stuff and even multitask a bit if you need to. And that can work quite well. I deliberately keep back some easy to do low energy tasks for late in the day so I can still work and still get some stuff done, but they don't require the same level of focus that I had earlier in the day.
Right. That makes sense. So I was reading an article not that long ago that says for people who roll out of bed and start looking at their phone for emails and messages tend to be less productive. Do you have an opinion about that?
I think it would depend on the person. But yes, I actually wait to look at email until I get to the office. Now, I work from a home office. So for me, it's important to keep my work and my playtime separate because working from a home office, you can easily work all night, right? because your email's still there. You can easily check your email in the evening. So I try to avoid checking email in the evening and working on those things. Similarly, when I get up in the morning, I actually shave and shower and do those things. And then I'm usually in my office between 7:30 and 9 at some point. And then I check email just to see if anything urgent came through. But for the most part, I actually don't even reply to my email first thing in the morning. Instead, I take my most difficult client project and I work on that first because that's the hardest thing that needs the most focus. Answering emails are easy, so I don't do them first.
Right. Do you think that varies with personality types and when our power time is? If somebody has more of a power time at 2:00 in the afternoon, is that when they should be reserving that time for their really high focus tasks, or is it still better to get those out of the way in the morning?
Well, there's a couple of aspects in this. First off, it does make sense to keep your most difficult task, your highest focus task, for the time when you have the most energy, which could be in the afternoon, and I've known some programmers and designers who are great at midnight or 1 in the morning, and they're fortunate if they work freelance, then they can do that. The problem with waiting till 2:00, which might be your peak time, is other things can get in the way. Like when you're in the office, if you're working in an office environment, you can get interrupted. They might start scheduling meetings for your most productive time. So in some cases, you may have to still work on the most important thing first thing in the morning just because you don't know what you're going to get hit with later in the day.
Right. And that, again, is another important, you're just full of important points here, aren't you? And I say this to my son a lot because he's moving into an ownership position with my house painting company, is don't assume that there's going to be time left in your day.
Yes.
Because if something is important, move it to the beginning of the lineup because who knows, any number of things could happen. You could end up with an internet failure or you could end up with mom-in-law coming by and not leaving if you have a home-based office or something. So there's lots of things that can happen. There's
ways of dealing with that too.
Yeah, I guess so there is. I don't have one, so I don't know. But there's always things that pop up that we don't expect, which is another, I would think, a good argument for getting those important things done sooner in the day. So
yes,
you're
even though you might have more energy in the afternoon, doing them sooner helps prevent other things from taking away from them, yes.
Right. Yeah. And is it called the Eisenhower matrix or something?
The Eisenhower matrix is one of it. Brian Tracy calls it eat the frog first. Like, do the worst thing first. You have to do it in your day. I know, but that's the idea. If you get it out of the way, everything else tastes good, right? So, I prefer to think of it as a reward system. If I work the first hour on the most horrible, most difficult task I have and get out of the way, the rest of my day feels easy because then I'm doing stuff I really love, like chatting with clients or developing new workshops, and that stuff's fun, right? So I always work on the worst first.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So how do you feel about lists? Like, are those critical? How do you compartmentalize those? What would be your perception or position on lists?
Lists are a good way to start for time management because it's kind of like an outline of what you need to do. But you need to go beyond that. And I prefer to call them tasks rather than lists. And so good best practices with a task is a task should have a due date, who it's organized to, and a priority level. So the benefit of that is when you're looking at so instead of looking at your list, you're looking at a task list that's sorted by priority and due dates.
Right.
So
okay.
Taking it the next step further is to work with a good task management system that lets you do that. And this helps too, especially like even though I work in my home office, I delegate to multiple people to get different projects done for clients. So I actually have I don't have people working in my office, but they're scattered around the world. So a system like that lets me see at a glance. It's like a dashboard that shows me all the work being done in my company and what's behind.
Oh, that's a great idea. So are there technology like programs that help with that?
Oh, there's lots of great ones out there. One I often suggest to people who are starting out fairly new is one called Trello, which is TRELLO.com. And I'm not affiliated with them in any way. And the tool is free. And it works really cool because it works kind of like on a card system, almost on a board on your computer. And you can actually drag the cards around to give priority order. You can drag them to different lists. You can also set a priority and assign them to your team. And you can have as many boards as you want. So you can have one board for marketing, one board for product development. So it's a lovely system to look at. So that's one I often recommend to people just starting out.
And can that be used with the different members of your team as well?
Yes, it can. So all your members can see the same board, or they can see just the cards assigned to them, so they don't need to see the other ones. So it's a case of simplifying too. If there's 50 tasks but only 10 are yours, you don't need to see the other 40. It's just random noise that's confusing you if you have to pick your 10 out of the 50. Instead, you see only the 10 that are assigned to you.
Brilliant. Super good. And so you help people with these sorts of tools in their businesses or their life, or what?
Both business and life. I find a lot of cases where I'm helping people with their time management in their business. It carries over to their life because most people want to be able to get more done so they can get back to their life. They don't want to work 12 to 14 hours a day. They want to go home on time. And to me, that's the real purpose. I don't want to teach people time management so they can do 3 times as much work in a day and still work 14 hours. I want them to triple their productivity so that they can go home on time and be with their family and friends or do their hobbies or go to the beach or whatever it is that's important to them.
What an unusual concept.
Well, that's what life's about. Life is about what you enjoy doing, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just about the work.
We're so conditioned to this working more means that you are somehow more important or that you are more successful or you're all of these other things. And what you're saying is that working more just means you're working more, not that you're working smarter, not that you're getting more done. It just means you're taking that time away from other things.
You are, and it diminishes you. I once met a very successful lawyer that I was coaching, and he was making over $1 million a year, like profit, and he'd come over from India and was a self-made man. His story was amazing. He was an amazing person, but he had worked so hard for so long to get to where he was that he couldn't not work. So on a Sunday, he'd find himself going into the office, and it wasn't because there was something behind, like a brief that had to be prepared for Monday. He just could not let go of that level of work. And I said, well, what about your family? I mean, and he had children and a wife, and he had a good relationship with them. But I said, over time, I mean, if you keep not being with your family, you can cause problems that way. And he had a real problem with letting go of the work because that's what had gotten him to that level. And he didn't need to work like that anymore. Most of us would go, wow, we're making $1 million a year. We can relax a bit.
Mm-hmm. But I understand that serial working because, I do that. People are like, what's your hobby? And I'm like, I work. It makes perfect sense for me to keep working. And if I get that done, let's just create a new project.
And I have the opposite problem. I have too many hobbies.
Yeah, I kind of think it might be nice to have hobbies, but I tend to have a very low attention span. So I try something once and then go, nah, I'm good.
And nothing wrong with that. And you might try 10 different hobbies and find that, you burn through them, you get what you need from them, and then you move on. And that's okay too. Those people are often called scanners. But, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the key thing with a hobby is it gets your mind away from the work. It totally disconnects. And that refreshes you so that when you go back to work, you're a lot clearer and you can work better. It also gives your back burner a chance to work. So one time I was running my own hosting, and it was run using a system called Unix, and I was having to learn the programming language. And it was a mistake. I should not have been doing this. I did not have the skill or even the interest in learning it. I had a horrible problem, and some of my clients' websites were down. It was a horrible problem. And I was like banging my head against the wall to make it work. And I could not make it work. And it was a Saturday morning, and finally I said, I'm going to take a few hours and clean and I need to clear my head. So I was cleaning, and that doesn't sound very restful, but it's much more restful than struggling with a programming language you don't know for long.
Well, it's a different part of your brain too.
Yeah, and in the 3 hours that I was dusting, all of a sudden it came to me what I had missed. Like the key point just clicked in my head at one point, and I went over and solved the problem in 5 minutes.
I love it.
So that's what happens when you give your brain a chance to work on it, like step away for a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do that. Often I'll wake up in the middle of the night, which sucks for me because I don't sleep. I'll wake up in the middle of the night, and that's when my answers come. But I think it's definitely that need to get away from it. And it does make sense. And I know I should have more hobbies and less work. I'm working on it. It'll happen.
Well, and here's how it happens. You invest time. You say, okay, every Saturday afternoon from 1 till 4 is when I'm going to do hobby time for me, or every Thursday night from, say, 6 till 9. Like, you just pick a time every week that's going to be your hobby time. And if you don't know what your hobby is yet, call it an artist date. Well, I'm going to go out and look at, creative stuff. I'm going to go to Michael's or Chapters or a library, find an interesting book to see if it's a hobby I might like.
Right. So, okay, I'm a commitment phobe. So I have a really hard time scheduling things. And I understand how this doesn't necessarily serve me well, because if I could just get very regimented and, check my emails between 8:30 and 9 o'clock every morning, I would probably be far more productive. But what do you do with people like me who just, I tend to be a little bit more random?
Well, you can be random and still set some times there. Sometimes I work on projects in what I call carousel method, where I work like 30 minutes on each project and rotate them through. And I do that especially if I've been away or I've been behind for a while. Mm-hmm. And that works that way. But the first key thing would be to establish the boundary between work and home life. That would be the first key thing. And I do that quite simply. I worked for a lot of years in a bank and other places. So I was used to going to work and working roughly 8 till 5 every day. So I do something similar now. I work, whenever I get up in the morning till probably about 3 in the afternoon, and then I cut out and I stop working. Then I go exercise and do something else. So by having that set time, I know that, okay, if it's 6 o'clock in the evening, I don't know what to do. I know that I don't go to work because that's home time. If it's 2 o'clock and I don't know what to do next, I look on my task list, because that lists my next project to work on, my next priority item. So I have places to go. So that way, that's the difference between home time. And many of us are taking some home time, but we probably default to watching TV or doing something else. So at the end of the week, you might have watched 10 hours of TV, and you never really got that project you wanted, maybe like writing that book you wanted to write, or learn a musical instrument, or maybe you've always wanted to paint. Do painting. Not you in your case, because you already paint all the time, but maybe you want to paint canvases instead.
Right. Build furniture, do something. Yes.
I'm sure painting would not be the hobby for you.
Well, the irony is sometimes it has been.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But it could be. Nothing would stop you from also, making artwork on canvas, right?
Right. Well,
so that's the key.
Yeah, I just tend to be, I know what has to get done in a day, but right now I feel like doing this, and then I just go and do that first. And I guess that falls into maybe your dusting or your housekeeping or vacuuming or whatever it was that you said you did earlier, that breaking it up. So that you can come back fresh. So maybe if I start looking at it like that, it'll be far more effective.
Yeah, and the cleaning too is another problem. Is sometimes we work all day and then we kind of spend all of our spare time cleaning and we never actually get to our hobbies. So maybe, and do pick a day when you do cleaning every week. And for most of us, we worry far too much about cleaning. I mean, our houses are not that bad, and it's not like we have people coming over the white glove treatment. And if we do, they shouldn't be the people we're having over anyway.
Exactly.
And but instead schedule the fun first. So what my wife and I do is we will actually say, okay, weekend's coming up, which day is adventure day? So we'll say, okay, we're going to take the Saturday or the Sunday, like we'll pick one day, and that's the adventure day. So that day we're not going to do the yard work, we're not going to do the cleaning. That's the fun day where we're going to go off and explore our lovely island here in Vancouver Island. Mm-hmm. And then Sunday is the day we settle down and I get out and mow the lawn or wash the vehicle or weed the garden or whatever else we have to do.
Right. Yeah, it inevitably, when I make that sort of plan, something comes up. I was going to, on the 13th, I talked to my son, and we were going to set that day aside to do a bunch of stuff for the work, like cleaning up the garage, getting all the stuff ready for summer, that kind of thing. And then a couple of hours later, we were online, and somebody had told us about the Nanaimo Amazing Race that's happening. And it happens to be happening on that day. And this is the story of my life. And so then I'm like, oh, damn, do I stick with the original plan of getting ready for summer, or do I do the Amazing Race?
Well, it's an investment. If the Amazing Race is a fun thing to do, then do it because it's only on that day. Right. Cleaning the garage and getting everything else ready can fit on any other day, or it can be done over a period of days. You can say, okay, we're going to work an hour a night on the garage until it's clean, in the weekdays, nights or something. So there's no right or wrong, but the key thing is set the fun first, set the hobby first, and then because cleaning and other work will flow in to fill any possible opening you have in your calendar. So if you don't set aside the fun and adventure and the things that make life worthwhile and the hobbies and things first, then they get overwhelmed by the other.
Right. And then I suppose that works well with your health as well. So if you're going to the gym, it may not be one of your adventure activities, but it's one of those things that, keeps you healthy and able to work. So what do you recommend, scheduling that in first and then work around it when possible?
Yes, my wife and I have made a commitment for our health to go to the gym twice a week. And we have set times, set days aside that we go to do that. And the goal is minimum 2 days a week, but we try to shoot for 3. But the idea is that we want to hit the minimum anyway, even if we don't get 3 or 4 in. And some weeks we've gotten 3 or 4 in, some weeks only 2, and some weeks something comes up and we might only get 1. But by committing to it, most weeks we're hitting it. I also go for a walk every day at lunch, and that's and a few years ago I was doing it, but I was only doing it in the nice days. I wasn't doing it on the wet and rainy days. But over the last year, I've actually managed to keep it where I do it every day, and that's been a
that's
huge
impressive.
On my health. Yeah,
that's really good.
I also find taking a walk at lunch clears my mind and makes me really energized for working. Like I can work later in the afternoon because I'm not so logy after lunch.
Right, and that's a good point as well. It's and breaking up that day. So there's lots of different ways. Like for people who are just tuning in, we are talking with Garland Coulson here, and he is Captain Time. We're talking about time management. If you have any questions and you want to call in and talk to him, you can call in at 844-390-8255. Again, that's 844-390-8255. And we're talking about if you have no time, it is your fault. So for those of you just tuning in, this is what we're talking about. So do you think that technology has actually made this whole world of time management easier or more difficult?
The answer is yes. Both. It has made it easier for people who embrace it and learn to use it and master it. For people who let the technology master them, it's become a big drag. So, for example, I use the technology tools to be able to expand my market around the world so I can earn more money in less working time. I automate a lot of the work I do using technology so that it takes less time. So overall, it's been a great boon for someone like me. But for someone who doesn't know how to turn off their notifications or is totally entranced by their phone and that's all they ever look at, then it's actually given them less time to pursue their hobbies or do the things important to them.
Right.
But that's their choice. So mastering your technology is critical.
That makes a lot of sense. Like I use Acuity for my scheduling, and that is the best thing that has ever happened in my life of scheduling. For the radio show, for talking to guests, meeting clients, that sort of thing. It is so nice to have. I used to spend so much time with that back and forth oh, do you have Thursday free? And then by the time I get the email back, I wouldn't have it free. And then I'd have to pick a different day. And so definitely those tools that are good, helpful tools. And maybe like you're talking about with this Trello, using those ones, finding that what is your need and then finding the program that works for it, as opposed to just creating it like a sinkhole.
Right, right. And I use a similar tool that you do, and it's fantastic because I have clients around the world trying to book times with me. So going back across, with someone in Australia, because we're even they're a day ahead, trying to find a date that worked. I could go 2 or 3 weeks before we get a coaching time. Now they can book it on the spot. And I get more paid coaching gigs because of that, because they're able to use their coaching hours faster. Right.
Yeah. So so what I'm hearing you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is finding those tools that are actually serving your time management as opposed to sucking your time management. What about, so do you use a timer?
I use a timer religiously. So I work primarily in 30-minute blocks. So I do two things. I work in theme days and then I work in timers. So a theme day is where I might say, okay, today's a marketing day. Tomorrow might be a content like a product and content development day. So if today is a marketing day, I'll go to the first marketing project on my list, and perhaps it's approaching corporate clients for training, and I'll set a timer for 30 minutes, and I will work full-blown, uninterrupted for 30 minutes with all the tasks in priority sequence. At the end of 30 minutes, I take a break, and I just use a timer on my smartphone. It's nothing fancy, nothing that costs me any money. You can use a kitchen timer as well. And after my short break comes, then I go back and I say, what's my second marketing project? And I do the same thing for 30 minutes. And that's how I work through all my marketing projects. And I do the same thing the next day for if I'm writing for my blog, or if I'm going to be creating new workshops. I again rotate through all of those systems 30 minutes at a time.
So what happens if you're 30 minutes into a project and there's only like 15 minutes left? Do you just roll over that 15 minutes, or do you religiously just stop because that's how you trained yourself?
So, sorry, if I'm 30 minutes into a project and
it looks like it's going to take 45 minutes.
It depends on how close I am. There's occasional times I'll go the extra minutes to finish, but also I have to get to the other projects as well, right? Mm-hmm. Or there might be a time when I'm really writing a really great paragraph. I might go on another 5 minutes or something. So it's not like I'm a fanatical, fascist about the time, but I find this really helps. And it's amazing how much I get done in 30 minutes. Like I've had cases in the past where I've had tasks that I worried about getting done for like 3 weeks. I was worrying every day. I got to get to that, could never get to it. Finally, I get to it, and it takes me 15 minutes. Yeah. And then I'm smacking myself in the head going, I went through 3 weeks of agony for something I could have knocked off in 15 minutes at any time during that time. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do.
Crazy how we do that to ourselves. Like I'll do that as well. And it'll be like, oh, I know I got to get this off to a client, but I'm tired and I just don't want to do it. But then I spend the entire night thinking about it. Right. Even though I've made a deal with myself, I'll do it in the morning. But yeah, it's that strange relationship that we have with putting things off.
The other benefit of having the timer really helps for is I'm self-employed, so I don't get a paycheck ever. I have to go up and sell to clients in order to bring in income. And I've supported myself this way for the last 25 years, so it works. But if I stop selling for a few weeks, my income will dry up. So every week I want to spend a minimum of about 30% of my time on marketing. Mm. So this is what works for me, is because I know with the way I've set my timer and the way I've set my time blocks, I know I'm getting at least that 30% in for marketing. And a lot of entrepreneurs who start out, maybe marketing's not their forte and they kind of don't like to do it. So they keep putting it off, and then they work on all the other stuff. So they might have gone through a week and maybe only spent 1 or 2 hours of marketing. And then they're saying, well, why are my sales so low? And I'm going, well, how many hours did you actually put into marketing this week? And they go, well, none or 2. And I say, well, there's your problem, because you're not giving focused time on the marketing, which is a critical part. So especially entrepreneurs wear many hats. That's the problem. We have to be the customer service person, we have to be the marketer, we have to be the product development person, and the accountant. And so it's very easy to get tied up and let something as important as marketing slip.
Right. And we are, after all, we're in business to make the money. So we have to keep that in mind. It's not just about doing those things that we love to do. We have to do those things, eat those frogs first, so that we are able to do the things that we love to do.
And I save the things I love to do for late in the day deliberately. Because for me, writing a new workshop or brainstorming a new workshop is a great joy. Like it's really fun and energizing. So I can do that when I'm at my lowest energy levels at 3 or 4 o'clock in the day. I don't have to, that's easy for me. So that's where I do the really heavy stuff in the morning to get it out of the way.
Right. So how do you know if one of your processes is just like time sucking and if it's actually being productive? Like I had an assistant one time and she spent a huge amount of time plugging everything she had to do in this detailed spreadsheet that she created. And she probably could have gotten half of the stuff done in the time it took her to fill out this program. So how do we balance that between useful use of like a good use of our time and busy work?
Sure. And I've had clients do that as well. They get so enthralled with the new system that they put stuff in the system. They've worked with it for 3 months and they haven't actually done one task in the system because they're so busy playing with the system and getting it just the way they want it. Mm-hmm. So one key rule is if you have something that can be done in like 2 minutes or less, just do it. Mm-hmm. It's not worth entering into a task management system unless it's something recurring. Like if it's something you had to do every month, then it makes sense to put it in your system and make it recurring so it will remind you to do it next month. But Other than that, it's not worth putting in. I usually put, definitely if I've got tasks that are being delegated to other people, I put them in the task management system because that's how it gets delegated. But you can actually set up too, some of these systems will automatically email the task to people. So you don't have to enter it twice. Like you don't have to enter it as a task in something like Trello and then send them a separate email. Mm-hmm. So I work with that a lot. Like I actually prefer to move things like email and support tickets and stuff like that into a task management system whenever I can. So.
Right. That makes a lot of sense because like I know people who will make a to-do list and they will put items on there that they just finished doing so that they could check them off.
Yeah, and so the idea is your to-do list should be of things you're going to do. Now, there can be cases if you have staff or if you have freelancers, there can be benefits to having a whole bunch of checked off things there because you can see what they've done. So if you're evaluating, well, I've got these 3 freelancers, I'm not sure which ones are working, you can go through and say, what have they accomplished? Okay, they charged me for 10 hours this week. And what did they do this week? So the ticked off items become the proof of, well, that, they didn't really get much done and they charged me the whole 10 hours. Or this person got twice as much done, they charged me for 3 hours. Well, that's the person I'm going to give more hours to. Right.
That makes sense. Very cool. So now that kind of leads into that paying people. Like I know you have interesting thoughts about how people should be paid and it's not by the hour.
Yeah, certainly we're kind of used to being paid by the hour, right? So if you've got somebody who sits there all day and does nothing, they get paid the same amount as somebody who's really gung-ho and works really hard. So so a lot of our current methods of payment are kind of unfair to people who are really good, but they support people who are lazy.
Yes.
And now if you as the business owner probably don't want to buy into a system like that because what you're doing is you're rewarding your worst people. And eventually your people who are doing really well, if they're not getting any more money than the other people, they're just going to either quit working themselves or they're going to go somewhere else that recognizes their talents. Mm-hmm. So I believe in paying for what's being done, like for what's being accomplished, for the outcomes.
Right. Yes. It's I know one time I had a painter and she would submit hours and she would say, oh, I submitted for 10 hours today, but I only worked 8. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And she said, so I expect to get paid 10. And I'm like, huh. And so where's this going? And then she would say on another day, I put in 8 hours today, but I only really worked 6 of them. So I'm only charging you for 6. And it was actually a really great relationship that we ended up having in terms of her getting paid because she always felt a connection to how hard she was working, to what she got paid. Now, it didn't work for everybody, but it certainly worked for her.
Yeah, and that will make a difference. I mean, your people who are really good, who want to be productive, who want to do well, will work hard. Mm-hmm. But the problem is there's also the other people. And it's not that they're a huge number, they're not even 50%, but there's always some people who are not going to work out. And this is why I hire and fire freelancers really quickly. And I do a huge amount of testing. Like I might actually hire 3 freelancers for the same job, have all 3 of them do it for me for 2 hours, pay all 3 of them, and then I look at the results. And then the one that did the best, I give more hours to.
Right. Yeah, that's the way to do it. Do you think that it's easier to do that with a business like yours where you are say maybe getting somebody to do some social media stuff, or like it's packageable as opposed to somebody who's in retail and just has somebody standing behind a till?
Well, yes, it's somewhat easier for me because, as you say, it's packageable. I can say, okay, I want, this amount of social media done and send out every month, and then I'm going to monitor it. And here's the key criteria I'm going to use to measure success. And then here's what I'm willing to pay you, and they accept it or not pay it. So you can do that as a package. Retail, you could do that way, but it's kind of hard because they can't control everything, right? So your average retail staff member, the cashier, can't control the actual sales in the store. As an example, but you could, for example, if you hired a marketing person for the store, you could pay them a base and then a bonus based upon how much they increase the sales.
Right.
So there are ways to tie the income to that. You can even do that somewhat for your staff too, because you can also tie bonuses to things like customer satisfaction. So if a lot of customers are raving about one of your cashiers, why aren't they being paid more? Mm-hmm. Because you want to keep that cashier. If that's your best cashier, you want to keep them. And unfortunately, if you pay them the same as the person who's always frowning and grumpy, then and the grumpy cashier, is not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. But your best people can always find work elsewhere, and that's why it's important to reward them.
Right. We do this thing at work. I'm listening to something that Mind Valley does, and I thought, how can I tweak it for my company? And so what I do is we do love tokens. So I give my staff virtual tokens, and between paydays, they distribute it amongst their coworkers. And the person who gets the most tokens ends up with a bonus. And so it's just, they vote for each other based on how well they're showing up and if they care about their job and are they good to work with. And it's amazing how people respond to it in such a positive way, because it's a way of appreciating each other. And it's really cool to see what some of these people do with the money. Often they'll spend it on each other. It's pretty neat watching that. And then it gives me great insight as to who is working as part of the team and who's not.
That's brilliant. And it's a great way because it's letting the coworkers decide amongst themselves. And you feel like they're giving them a little bit more control or a little bit more say and feedback of who they want to help or who they want to recognize, right?
Yeah.
And that's a brilliant system. I really like that. That's fantastic. So.
Terrific. Well, you can use it. Anyway, we're almost out of time. That went by really fast. Talk about running out of time. How do people get a hold of you?
Basically, you can go to captaintime.com, and there's contact information there, articles, resources, a few free online courses people can sign up for. So lots of ways to reach me through there.
That is terrific. And any last parting words for our listeners?
If you keep doing the same thing you're always doing, you're going to get the same results. So you need to actually make a change, treat time the same way you would a money investment. Budget it and invest it wisely. Don't let other people spend it for you.
And that's great because everybody wants to spend my time. I know that. People, and if you want something done, give it to somebody busy. And so I'm always busy. People are always asking me for things. So I think I'm going to take some of that advice. That's terrific.
Yeah. People can't take advantage of you unless you let them.
There is also that. But sometimes it's easier to do the task than to have a conversation about not wanting to do the task.
You can do sometimes. You can keep it really short. Just,
no.
It doesn't fit my time budget this week.
There. Okay. I'm gonna memorize that statement. Well, thank you so much, Garland, for being a guest on this show. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you about time, and it's something that a lot of us just take for granted and don't think about. So super important work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alison, for having me.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
And for those of you listening, if you don't question something, then what is the point of believing in it?
So what do you think now? Visit Alison on her website, thinkopposite.com, or write to her at info@dominothinking.com. Don't let this be the end of the conversation.